we'll just call it high intensity training would be like one all out set. Let's just go with that for a second. Okay.
For sure.
Let's run with that for a second. Now, when I was doing this all out, now everybody's recovery is going to be different, but when I was doing this all out type of training for most exercises, if not all exercises, yeah, man, like I couldn't handle really, I would like three, maybe 4 days a week max. So it's interesting for you. What I'm curious about is how do you manage that recovery aspect on a week to week basis? Do you find that it might change? Like 1 week you can handle, I don't know, 4, but then the next week you're like, man, I'm zonked and it's only been my third session this week. Do you have that happen? And if so, what do you do about it?
Yeah, that's definitely a good question for sure. I think when, you know, you're playing with these kind of movements and this kind of intensity, of course, you'll be, as a result, reducing frequency compared to others that may be leaving, you know, again, more reps on the table, maybe making some slightly more, maybe some slightly less challenging overall movements that they're using more externally stabilized exercises where they can create more accurate stimulus, et cetera, et cetera. So how do I manage it? I go to bed pretty much at the same time every night. I wake up at the same time every morning. I spend 9 hours in bed every night. 8 of that at least is quality sleep. I live for the most part outside of the weeks where coaching is extremely busy, a pretty stress-free life. And I'm able to do that because I've cultivated an environment where I've learned how to manage stress better. I used to be very stressed at the slightest of things. And I've seen that affect people mentally. I've seen it affect people in a physicality side of things as well, like in terms of like just true health. Like I've seen people decline in terms of their health as a result of stress. So I've thought like, right, I can't just keep getting stressed about little things. Yeah. So I've got to live life. And I kind of, with stress as well, which is, by the way, I think just the biggest factor in terms of recovery management. When I get a little bit worried about work or stress with clients, whatever it is, I just flick it on its head and try and just turn it into gratitude and remind myself how lucky I am to do what I do and how I've aspired to do this for so many years, that the stress is kind of a privilege rather than a problem, put it that way.
Okay.
And then I also have an extremely supportive partner in the sense that she will help me out with all of my food and, you know, make sure that I calm down and switch off at the right time. And yeah, if I didn't have a supportive partner, I would just work myself into the ground, because I like to work a lot and I like to do things that are relative to my progression, but sometimes they are the thing that shoot you in the foot. Because with like, I don't know if you've heard of Valentin Tambosi, but he's a great coach out in Vienna. Okay. Probably someone that you can maybe have on this podcast as well. He said a great quote a long time ago with he just basically said that with every yes, there's a no. And it's so true for bodybuilding, because when you start saying yes to loads of things, you say no to being able to recover, to get in for another session. So it's a statement that always lives in my head. I always think about, when I say yes to something, I always think about the no that is the preceding factor. You know, what am I saying no to as a result of saying yes to something? So I'm very smart with what I say yes to, basically. I think that's a good tool.
The answer here, folks, is get a partner who's going to cook for you, clean for you. No, I'm just joking. But
it does a lot to be fair.
Yeah, that's important. You know, I can relate to that. But as far as, let's say you did all that stuff is taken care of. You did all of the right things. Yeah. Have you had a scenario where still you're like, yeah, you're kind of dragging your feet going into the training session, and when you get there, you're like, I just don't have it today, but do you auto-regulate around something like that? Or do you not find that hasn't happened given the awesome recovery strategies you've implemented in your lifestyle?
Fatigue's inevitable. There's always going to be a session where you're not going to want to go. You're not going to want to train. It's a factor that we all will encounter at some point, you know, and if you ask any top athlete, do you feel tired when you go to your training sessions? They're probably going to answer yes, because they're at the top of their game. They're pushing their body to the limit. And what does that encounter? What do you get as a byproduct of taking your body into a place it doesn't want to go? Fatigue. So it's inevitable. The tools that we have as a bodybuilder is the smart management of fatigue, but not the mitigation. We don't want to completely mitigate fatigue. Without fatigue, where's the adaptation? Where's the stimulus? Like our bodies will get tired from training with weights. So we need to create adaptation. So yeah, it's just it's like you have to fight through an element of fatigue to produce what you want in terms of the overall stimulus. And you have to be smart enough to know when too much is impacting your progress, i.e. too much fatigue is blunting your appetite, too much fatigue is pulling away from your sleep, your recovery gets poorer and poorer and poorer, your lifts start to stall. This is where the logbook is such an important tool, because your logbook can tell you a lot of the things that you need answers to, like your progress can be stalling in the gym and you generally don't have that aggression that you maybe had a couple of weeks ago. That can be your first sort of port of call in terms of saying, right, you know what, I think it's time to probably take a bit of a devolume week or a couple of days of rest. I favor both. I favor a blend of reducing volume over the course of a microcycle and taking a couple of days rest at either the end or the start. The rest will be longer if the connective tissue issues are higher. If we're running into issues with connective tissue and we're feeling like pain, that's when days off are almost definitely needed, and a reassessment of some of the execution that we're performing is probably needed too. The reduction in volume is appropriate when you're just tired and the body is showing all the signs of high fatigue. This guy helps as well, the Aura Ring. I have one of these. I've had these for 3 years now, and as much as it's a little bit too reactive to resting heart rate, it does give you a pretty good baseline of things like resting heart rate, and obviously heart rate variability and your overall sleep as well. So when I notice those things start to trend in the wrong direction continuously, I'm like, I probably should keep an eye on what I should do next with training.
Let's just talk about preferences in terms of they prefer to have a system where they're leaving reps in reserve, and then they might save a set to failure in a specific periodized fashion. And then you have a few of the other people I've spoken with, yourself, Ben Howard, Mitch, even it seems to be the Brits actually.
It's the Dorian, the JP.